And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Valley of the Judged. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me as always is my good brother here in the temple, the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadara Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Robotic Enterprises would like to remind you once again that Cover Corp is not a black company, and for all the proof you need of that, just go look at Legal Mindset's newest tweet about something they fucked up on, admit they fucked up on, and they fixed.
It's always refreshing to see people take accountability instead of doubling down for the sake of their own pride, or trying to lecture you, for instance, about what is and isn't realistic in combat.
That guy is did he stop? I think he stopped talking, didn't he?
Yeah, I didn't see any further comment after that. I just had to have a bit of a laugh right along with the person who recently decided to be a bit sarcastic regarding the project of another friend of the temple, but that's a story that I'll get into after the show. Because I don't feel like completely burying anybody yet. But we are back. We are continuing our weeb shit kick as if I haven't been doing that in one form or another for the past 10 years and beyond that. Because when I spun the wheel for the next full-on season, after we finished up with Flux Fantasy, for now, I decided that this is what we're going to be focusing on next. And fortunately, this one is going to be significantly lighter. We are not going to have a repeat of what we had with Planet Bound this time around. And we get to delve a little bit into mechs, so as far as I'm concerned, it's a win-win. I will admit that while there is a link to the Drive Thru RPG page for the book in the description, when it comes to crediting the designers, which we do try and do here in the temple, this is where things got a little bit tricky. And since you were trying to do that, I'll let you take over on that Zan for a bit. Zan, you alive? Oh, never mind. Dog issues. I'll just have to filibuster for a little bit.
You know, you don't have to filibuster that long. All I have to do is stare at the dog and it gets scared and shuts up.
Fair.
I don't know if you could hear.
I could hear it.
The call or not.
I could hear it. I just wasn't paying too much attention because I've dealt with background noise incidents with interviews in the past.
Yeah, well, I was gonna go shut her up, and I did.
So what I was saying before you had to step step off for a second was I was gonna hand it over to you regarding the difficulties when it came to pinging somebody that we could credit the way we've done in the past.
Ah, yes. Okay. So this game in its credits a website called truein1.com and also facebook.com/therobotic, which is the specific page for the game. Though True in One Games also has its own Facebook page, which is referenced in the Robotic Age Facebook page. But I could not find for the life of me any social media beyond that. On top of that, looking at the True in One website, their blog hasn't updated since 2017, and looking at Preston Poland, the author, the creator, and I assume the head of True in One, looking at his Kickstarter profile, he hasn't done anything on Kickstarter since 2018. So finding someone to ping and say, hey, here's credit, where credit's due, was hard. We couldn't find a way to easily refer to them, so I just had to say True in One Games.
And while they do have a couple Facebook pages, we're not going to be linking a Facebook page on a tweet, for one. And two, when it comes to the Facebook page in question, it hasn't been updated since 2017.
Yep.
So for me, this is another case similar to Shonen Final Burst, where the stuff is there. It is purchasable. That is one of the rules that I've had to do over the last couple of years. But that's about it. And I will let you continue. I'll be right back in 1 second.
Yep. The other weird thing that I ran into, specifically looking at the Kickstarter, was that a couple of the Kickstarters were just canceled. It wasn't that they ran time and didn't meet goal and thus that didn't happen. There was one that didn't meet goal. But out of all the Kickstarters that were there, 2 of them were just straight up canceled, meaning that they were ended before the actual Kickstarter period had ended and the funds were not collected. For the first one that was canceled in 2015, the update message that explains why it was canceled is publicly available to see. But for the second project, the last one that we saw at 2018, it was a game called Pickup Group. It was going to be a card game where you imitate a MMO pickup group and all the terrible things that can come with that. The cancellation message was hidden for backers only, which is really weird, because that means that, now 6 years down the line from the cancellation, I'm
back.
Welcome back. I and anybody else who wants to know, hey, why was this canceled, can't, because we can't back a canceled project in order to see the backer message.
I'm reminded of when the King of Average roasted Simon, CMON, not Simon from Gurren Lagann, over their very poor communication a few years ago. I haven't checked on Simon in years. I don't even know if that Assassin's Creed TTRPG is even being developed still. And he had brought up how people were donating for certain projects at like the $1 level just so that they could try and get some communication with them, because you could only comment if you were a backer. So people would do the back because you believe the custom amount, and they would only pay $1.
Yeah.
But the fact that we are investigators by nature, but I think I can speak for you in the fact that neither you nor I enjoy having to go through extra hoops just to get dead ends.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, obviously the same policies that we have when it comes to covering the Robotic Age it's going to be the same as anything else we covered. Games, not names. Uh, I know some try and say that that policy is unreasonable. I say it's only unreasonable if you're a defeatist. But the Robotic Age is I guess I would describe it as a multi-genre affair that leans heavily in that style of science fiction and cyberpunk that was all over the place during the OVA bubble of the late 80s and early to mid 90s.
Yeah, I mean, some of the inspirations that they state are from movies: The Terminator, The Matrix, Tron, RoboCop, Short Circuit, and Blade Runner.
Mm-hmm.
For anime, Transformers, any series, and arguing about whether Transformers is an anime or not is don't even start. Fuck you. Fuck all of you out there.
You know what's always really funny? Seeing
that?
someone who rants about how much they can't stand anime and they're wearing a Voltron t-shirt.
Gundam, any series, Gurren Lagann, Kashern, Ghost in the Shell, and Atomic Robo Last Stop. And then for video games, Mega Man, any series, Armored Core, Zone of the Enders, Metal Gear Rising, Ratchet and Clank, and Portal.
Mm-hmm.
The trend we can see here, looking at the inspirations, is a lot of it's larger than life. A lot of it's about really cool robotics and really cool technology. And is specifically looking at anime like Kashern, Ghost in the Shell, games like Zone of the Enders, Metal Gear Rising. There's a lot of man-machine interface. What does it mean to be human? Sort of transhumanism, singularity. Themes we've all seen before, but these are some of the themes I personally love most. Things like the technological singularity, transhumanism, etc., because that sort of philosophical question can be expressed in a myriad of fashions. And in so doing, you get really cool, different answers that it's wide spectrum of different ways of expressing that one question. So I'm already intrigued as to see as to how this game will express that question.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of some of the rants that you and I have had regarding not depictions but perceptions of cyberpunk among various cultures and subcultures.
A rant that got so heated we created a Geek Watch episode for it.
Yeah, and what it ultimately demonstrated is that a lot of people who say they know about cyberpunk really don't. Like a lot of the people who were ranting at us, they know a handful of sources, but I'm not gonna see them at World Cyberpunk Day.
They know about cyberpunk. They know about cyberpunk from exactly one narrow angle.
Which I did a straight comment on Twitter the other day where I had said, okay, if I'm gonna do this whole thing of, oh, I need to accept that when most people think of tabletop, they're gonna think of D&D. All right, fine. If we're gonna play that game, then you have no room to criticize when somebody thinks of Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty when thinking about video games, because that's basically the argument. It's one of those things where if you're gonna play the game, you're gonna win the prize. But with the Robotic Age, and obviously we're gonna be dealing with the intro and the like. It opens after a bit of a blurb that reminds me of the old Shadowrun books of in-universe fiction between chapters. Although
it has that throughout the whole thing, according to the table of contents.
Yeah, World of Darkness did that a lot. I would still say my favorite interpretation of that concept was Exalted Second Edition. Where you had mini comics between chapters.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly helped that a lot of those mini comics were done by places like Imaginary Friends and, more importantly, Udon. Which I kind of hinted at when I talked about why Exalted Third Edition just didn't do it for me. But obviously opening up with what is a role-playing game, which that part we always skim because There's only so many ways you can say that.
Yeah, and we have a definition that we've put out in our own work that I think fits pretty well. So,
So then it goes into common terms like player and character, character sheet, character points, because the only thing to note on that is that this is a point-based game.
Yep.
And the remaining ones, GM, session, campaign, these are standard affair. I'd say by this point, it's not something we need to delve into because most people are going to know that kind of thing, if nothing else, by osmosis.
Yeah. Not to mention many of the terms are self-explanatory. They are what they say on the tin.
So after that, it goes into percentile dice and explaining what that is. But that's one of those things that's another osmosis affair.
Yeah.
Especially with the popularity of several of the Warhammer RPGs and the popularity of Call of Cthulhu.
And the popularity of polyhedral of the full 7 die set polyhedral dice that's been going around since the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know people who have a full set of polyhedrals that don't play tabletop just because they like dice.
Yeah, everybody likes their shiny math rocks.
Shiny math rocks are fantastic for a dragon like me.
Yeah. They then go into using 2d10 instead of percentile, which I'd say that's what most people end up doing anyways. I have rarely seen anybody try to break out a 100-sided dice or be particular about having a d10 that has the 10s. Most people just use whatever d10s that they have available at the moment. Also, if somebody tried to use a 100-sided dice at my table, I'd say, get the fuck out. If you really want that kind of thing, that belongs at the driving range at a golf course, not at the table.
He's actually not wrong about that. Just for people who don't know, the earliest some of the earliest creations for 100-sided dice were literally a golf ball wrapped in a plastic 100-sided sheet that any of the gaps were filled with beads that all weighed the same, so that way the weight was the same.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're actually made to form, but it's still basically a golf ball.
Yeah. And if you want that, there's probably a golf course in your relative area, or you could just do the driving range, also known as golfer's stress relief. Because you can just swing and not have to worry about anything.
Yeah, you don't have to have a stroke, or
Yeah. Unless you're sufficiently Scottish, according to Robin Williams.
I am sufficiently Scottish, so
yeah, I had to reference
a stroke.
Of course, when I did play golf, a good way to piss everybody off was as soon as you hit, immediately yell beach. Especially since there was one course in my area that was infamous for the fact that people suspected there were magnets in the sand because everybody kept hitting it, and it was one of those that's those infamous ones where it's like a little pot where there's a dirt wall surrounding it. Yeah, those suck.
Mm-hmm.
This one was like a 4-inch wall. But getting back on the rails, it then goes into what is the robotic age. Now that you know the basics, but don't really know what the robotic age is all about. This game is inspired by action-packed video games and anime where robotic characters run up walls, blast holes through buildings, and cut down waves of enemies. Players can make characters that shoot lightning like an angry god, control a drone army, or hit a target from half a city away. Anything you want to do is possible in the robotic age. Wait, hit a target from half a city away. With mind bullets! That's telekinesis, Kyle!
But how about the power to move you?
Of course, these are goals for your character. Everyone needs room to grow, so your character may not be amazing to start. Don't worry, though, you will get there. The Robotic Age is a game where your neighbor is an ex-warbot who still might have some military-grade hardware. Your brother just uploaded his mind into a robot body, and you are saving up to afford those cybernetic wings you always wanted. Unfortunately, just as you can make your body whatever you want it to be, there are those out there who want to be able to crush a man's skull, 2-foot extendable razor blades, or just want a plasma rifle to fire into a crowd. There are groups out there who say these monsters are the majority, who want to restrict the rights of anyone even slightly robotic and hold back any progress society has made in order to keep people safe. But you don't have to let them. You can make the world a better place for all people, man or machine. And as mentioned before, then it goes into the inspired bys. This is basically the game's Appendix N.
I am. As soon as the line "man or machine" was said, there's a certain riff that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Bum bum ba-na-na-na-na, bum bum ba-na-na-na-na. Anybody else who's listened to the Proto Men knows the song I'm referring to.
Yeah. Yeah,
The Stand, Man or Machine. Such a good song.
And I could easily see somebody using this system for a Proto Men style campaign.
Well, I mean, one of the inspirations is Mega Man any series, so yeah.
So that would definitely count. Although when it comes to Mega Man any series, even with that claim, it's clear that there are some that would be easier to do than others. With this OG and X, it's definitely in that vibe.
Zero. You could absolutely do Zero and ZX as well.
Yeah. Legends or Dash for the Japanophiles.
A little harder.
That one would be a little bit trickier. Battle Network, doable, but it's not going to be easy. And as far as I'm pretty sure there's one I'm probably missing.
There is.
Oh yeah, Star Force. So see Battle Network.
Well, I still think so. The thing is, since there's a combination of both the cybernetic, organic, synthetic interface thing, but there's also clearly like Tron. Tron is almost entirely about the cyberspace side of things. It's very, and they mentioned even your brother uploading his mind to a robotic body. There's very clearly a niche you could do the Battle Network games in as well. Battle Network and Star Force.
Mm-hmm.
So it is there. It's just probably not as prominent.
What I'm saying is I would be hesitant to get to run a Battle Network style affair as the first go with something like this.
Yeah, but on the plus side, Monk, at least this isn't just a script for a Mega Man game.
That is true.
Where you just choose which of the characters you're gonna play.
Yeah. And
what their potential ending is gonna be. I've got a new Bane for him, people.
That, if you want the details on what he's referring to, go look at the Valley stream from yesterday with Monarch. I will simply say that is probably going to go down as the worst one-shot I have done. I don't know why all the bad entries end up landing on Monarch's lap. It's nothing against him. I just think the Lady Luck hates him. Well, we know that there was that whole running bet with the Grim Reaper from 2 years ago.
The dice gods show no mercy, Monk. Amen.
Yes, but after a side thing, then we have the timeline going from 2013 to 2113. So 2013, warning of global warming. 2015, North Korea nukes Seoul. South Korea and Anchorage, with a third nuke falling short of California. The response is Pyongyang gets carpet bombed just a few hours later.
With traditional ordnance.
Mm-hmm. 2017, scientists mapped the neural pathways in the human brain. Access to the internet declared a human right. 2020, first female president of the United States is elected. I could make a politics joke, but I'm not going to. Moving on. Texas secedes from the United States, and the rest of the United States is like, oh, you finally did it, huh? Followed by Alabama and South Carolina. Interesting choices. The new American Civil War begins. 2023, with U.S. monetary and military support pulled from the rest of the world, the Middle East erupts in further violence. Israel is almost entirely wiped off the map, as well as much of Iran. The majority of the conflict is over quickly, and even years later, no one is sure who struck the first blow.
That's not believable. Israel has like the second best air defense in the world, with us being the first.
I feel I'm almost tempted to bring up the 7-Day War.
I'm almost tempted to bring up the fact that Iran has launched so many missiles, or excuse me, the Houthis have launched so many missiles at Israel in present day and hit nothing.
See.
Same with Hamas.
2026, new American Civil War ends with the country divided into two nations, the United States and the sovereign states.
Oh god, it's sovereign citizenship all over again! Run!
Oh god, I love sovereign citizens. No matter what I say, I don't feel bad.
Remember, Monk, I am a traveler going through. You do not own me. I'm not subject to your laws.
Yep. But 2030, first asteroid successfully deflected away from Earth by private spaceflight company Sycamore Air and Space.
Change that name to SpaceX and you've got something that might actually be real.
I would be tempted to add Aerosmith was not involved. I was also tempted to add Morgan Freeman was not involved either. How funny is it that you had two movies with the same premise on paper in the same damn year? 2034, global sea levels have risen 3 feet since 2013. Flooding of below sea level areas catch worldwide attention. Three feet in that amount of time. I think that's pushing things a little bit. But anyway, 2039, artificial muscle tissue approved for human use by the United States and later by the sovereign states. Interesting. 2042, all new cars in the market are now electric only.
That's never going to happen. We've actually there have been plenty of studies coming out recently that show that people who have EV electric vehicles actually pollute more in other places than normal people who have normal vehicles, and are actually polluting more than those who are not intentionally going green with their cars.
There is, even in motorsports, the current gen, which is being phased out for a whole new gen, I think starting next season in Formula 1, are hybrids. Most people complain about them sounding like vacuum cleaners, but they are, at the end of the day, hybrids. There is a full electric part of Formula 1 called Formula E, but you rarely see crossover in that. For a lot of Formula E drivers are like, it's a completely different affair. Like, there is no there might be crossover with drivers sometimes if you're lucky, but that's it. Except for that one driver who tried to say that women should try more for Formula E instead of Formula 1, and then got called out by Michelle Mouton, and she was like, well, Michelle Mouton was in rally, she doesn't know the stresses of Formula 1, and everybody was like, bitch, she was in Group B. The thing that was the wild west of the 80s in motorsport. If you want the full details, go look up Rally Group B and just see how fucking nuts that was. Anyway, 2048, Yellowstone supervolcano vents off pressure in southern Montana, resulting in a chain reaction that causes the largest Californian earthquake in the past 100 years. Millions are declared dead, and a cloud of ash covers parts of Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming for the next year.
Millions of people dead in California. Nothing of value is lost.
And people
Oh wait, did I say that out loud?
And people thought I was off base when I did an alt history case of what if a strong enough earthquake actually caused the San Andreas Fault to split a part of California off of the coast.
I thought you were off base about that because the San Andreas Fault can't actually do that. This is much more realistic, and like I said, millions of Californians dead. Nothing of value is lost.
Oh. Let's see. 2049. Non-combat drones use en masse to rescue disaster victims, remove debris, rebuild cities, and clear ash from the sky. Sovereign states and United States work together for the first time in 23 years. 2054. The Americas become strong allies and, although still separate, begin working together in world affairs. Not all are pleased by this. Both sides of America started working together. This has made a lot of people upset and is generally be considered a bad idea. 2058. Major breakthroughs in geoengineering and terraforming help stop advance of global warming. Sea level steady at 7 feet above 2013 levels.
So 7 feet higher means, I'm going to tell you all this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Sea levels being 7 feet higher than they are now means almost literally nothing.
Yeah, I know it's one of those cases that sounds scary, but once you apply a little bit of science to it, it's not as scary. Then 2060, first fully functioning artificial brain created.
Nice.
2061, first android created via a combination of artificial brain, robotic body, and functional artificial intelligence. 2064, global temperatures begin to drop, expected to return to early 2000s levels over the next 30 years. Also, hi there, Kiwi. 2066, artificial self-healing skin invented. Androids become prevalent in military, firefighting, search and rescue, and sunken artifact retrieval. 2067, advances in energy research allow creation of high-output cores and plasma-based weaponry. 2069, Commander J. Norton becomes the first man on Mars. Unfortunately, there was a significant amount of disappointment because there were no Enders on Mars. 2072, war breaks out between India and China, fought almost entirely by androids and drones. 2073, World War III begins despite best efforts from international community at large. Man fights alongside machine. 2078, World War III ends. Man and machine celebrate openly in the streets. So, World War III is 5 years. Interesting.
I'd also like to note that apparently the world didn't nuke itself to death because otherwise, remember, World War IV will be fought with sticks.
2079. An eighth of the world population has cyborg enhancements, mostly due to wartime injuries. 2080. Androids become mainstream, though most are openly discriminated against. 2089. A sixth of the world's population has prominent cybernetic enhancements, and the number is still rising. 2090. First human mind successfully uploaded into an artificial brain without major drawbacks. So, only minor drawbacks.
Like
29...
the fact that you can't go back.
Yep. 2094. Sycamore Interplanetary lands a small number of humans and androids on Mars to begin colonization. 2100. Android rights movement begins. Surprised it took that long.
Did it start in Detroit? Are they becoming human, Monk?
I like dogs.
Are we suddenly diving into a heavy-handed civil rights allegory?
That according to its creator is not a civil rights allegory.
We won't talk about how David Cage is
A hack.
Yeah, Monarch and I already did that. And he tried to defend David Cage. He really couldn't.
2103. Androids gained legal recognition as living beings in North America. The anti-android extremist group known as G27 formed the same day. Interesting name. When I hear G and a number, I'm thinking, like say G8 or G10 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
2108. Androids gain right to vote across Europe. 2109. Roswell, Mars becomes a thriving city, gaining new immigrants constantly. Of course, they chose Roswell as the name.
Mm-hmm.
2113. Amendments to give androids the right to vote failed to pass in both the SSA and the USA.
So androids got to vote in Europe, but not in the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So then it gets into some of the factions. First going into the new civil war that divided the United States into the sovereign states. Although the choice of states I find a bit odd because you have this huge block between those two. Like
yep.
when I think of how I contrast this with, say, the UCAS in Shadowrun, the United Canadian and American States.
Yep.
Which has a natural dividing line, but having this massive split between an eastern and western area like that just raises a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's kind of weird that they were able to somehow keep Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming.
Mm-hmm. Let's see then.
Whereas apparently Minnesota stayed in the U.S. there for you, Monk.
Yeah. It's just if international flight is still a thing, you're gonna have large, awkward conversations with flights from like New York to L.A. or their equivalent. Obviously, after that they go into like global warming and geoengineering, which we already somewhat covered. Though it brings up that the forests of Chernobyl were enveloped in one of the biggest wildfires on record that spread irradiated ash across Russia. That's a puckering thought.
Yeah.
Although even with that, I don't. Russia's too big for that to cause too much of an issue.
Yeah.
See, then the first androids. We have a nice little image over here.
Yeah. I'm looking at the World War III section. Apparently, the Americas got dragged into World War III because on China's side, because it said that their debts would be instantly forgiven if they helped China. You can tell now that this game and the setting is made by someone who doesn't actually understand the power dynamics between the U.S. and China. Remember, people, if the U.S. just simply refuses to export any more food to China, China collapses. They import 30% of our excess foodstuffs. It accounts for, at last estimates, 70% of their foodstuffs. We stop exporting, they starve to death. They become a second North Korea.
Yeah. But no, obviously, we're not trying to slag the author. It's just more of us having some fun and riffing the setting.
It's my politicstism, and I don't mean politicstism as in the politics that everybody fucking fights about. I mean, the shit that actually matters, economic moves and fuck. Habitual line crosser gets to have missiletism. I get to have tism about whatever the fuck I please, god damn it.
Yep. But then the whole thing with the mainstream and a image representing the protests towards androids.
Hey, that guy in the wheelchair with the cross on his shirt. Why does he look like a Hyotoko mask?
It's the lines.
It's the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
It's the mouth and the mustache mostly.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know what a Hyotoko mask looks like, look at almost any of the Katana village members, the Katana Smith village members in Demon Slayer, or just the Katana Smith that is Tanjiro's Katana Smith. That's a Hyotoko mask.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a mask used to invoke the fire god. It's supposed to be someone blowing on the flames.
Yep. So then we have a bit further on that, and a nice little image of what I'm guessing was a colony ship with the thing of bringing new life to old worlds.
It is the Sycamore interplanetary ship. It does look like it.
Mm-hmm. And after a bit on artificial versus organic, then we have the big wigs of the 21st century, which are Sanmoto Incorporated. We feed the world, the largest agricultural biotechnology corporation. If it grows, there is a chance Sanmoto either engineered it, maintains it, or distributes it. And Sycamore Interplanetary, bringing new life to old worlds. A privatized spacefaring and shipping company, Sycamore Interplanetary is the cheapest and most reliable way to transport cargo or people to Mars. I am guessing they have some sort of means to make it so that you're not several months in transit.
Actually, the most expensive part of any part of current day space travel is not time. It is escaping the gravity well. I'm guessing they've probably established some system of orbital elevators,
Mm-hmm.
and everything launches from platforms that are already outside of the gravity well of Earth.
Yeah, since a lot of I think it'd be fair to say that most of the fuel that's burned for most space flight is just to get out of Atmo.
Yes, I mean that's why you have so many stages, and why the shuttles or whatever capsule it is themselves are so small and don't really have much fuel in them.
And in Zone of the Enders, it's part of the reason why the Urenbeck catapult was such a massive leap.
Yes, because it allowed you to use was essentially a giant Gauss rifle for mecha and ships to launch things out into orbit.
Mm-hmm.
And outside of the gravity well.
Yeah. And in a lot of anytime you have even just local interplanetary travel, there's usually going to be some sort of tech to give the answer of, okay, this is how humanity's able to be semi-casual space travelers. You know, stuff like Cowboy Bebop and Fading Suns have the warp gates. Something like Wing Commander has jump points. You know, Macross has space folding.
The fold drive.
BattleTech also has jump points.
BattleTech has Comstar, which does everything. I swear to fucking God.
Yeah. And it's funny that you bring that up because before we started this, I was watching Science Insanity's breakdown of Smoked Jaguar. The clan who was such big assholes that when they were finally getting their ass kicked, all the other clans said, "That sounds like a you problem." But then we have the Capex Consortium, building a better you. Originally several specialty companies, the Capex Consortium is now the world's largest manufacturer of cybernetic limbs and robotic endoskeletons for both the military and everyday use.
Robotic endoskeletons.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
For everyone who doesn't know that word, it means skeletons on the inside.
Yep. And Gleipnir Memory and Power, founded a century ago as a game design company, Gleipnir shifted their focus to artificial brain design and universal power core distribution, beating out all other competition.
Why Gleipnir? Why Gleipnir? Gleipnir makes no sense in this fucking context. You want to know what would have made sense, Monk?
What?
Moonin. Memory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, Hugin and Moonin. Memory and thought. Or, alternatively, one that's even more Odin, Hlidskjalf. The throne he sits on that allows him to see everything!
Yeah. And
Fuck! Gleipnir's just a fucking...
yep. And
not just, I shouldn't say just. But it's not the same.
yeah. And Martin Duke, a real estate mogul and venture capitalist who is now the largest single landowner on Mars. Some claims he runs his operations on Mars more like a mafia don than a businessman thanks to lax regulations.
For those who don't know what Gleipnir was, it's the chains that hold down the Fenris wolf until the time of Ragnarok.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I say it doesn't make sense in context.
Yeah. So, I think with this and obviously we skimmed over a few things, but I do appreciate that it goes into the basics of the world before we start to really get into the crunch, because with something like this, establishing the world that you're going to be playing in, I think, is important.
It is. And as Monk already stated, we don't generally dive deep into lore. That's something that we want others to explore with the games. We're mostly here to look at the mechanics. The reason we did at least brush over them was to get the tone. Mm-hmm. What sort of tone is this game going for? What sort of setting are we working in? And it's a very established setting. So what we see here, and what I expect to see when we explore further parts of the game, is that this is a toolkit set in a very specific sandbox. And I'm actually looking forward to that, because I like to see what people can do when they've said, yeah, this is the world this game takes place in, and here's all these tools you can use within it.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Now, there is one since character points were mentioned, that does bring into one thing that I'm going to dive into once we get into character creation, and that is the analysis paralysis issue. Now, a lot of games use full-on point-based character creation and character advancement, and on paper, there's nothing wrong with this. I'm well aware of the selling point. You know, you have a lot more freedom with that kind of setup, as opposed to classes or archetypes or whatnot. Mm-hmm. I get that, and that's a very fine selling point. However, I do wish that some folk would acknowledge the other end of that spectrum, namely the fact that a lot of that within that you have a lot of options, and it's not always the most forgiving if you make a mistake or make an oversight because you didn't realize the actual value of certain stats over a perceived value. That and sometimes getting someone to build a foundation around a more open system is a little bit trickier than an archetype-based one.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the reason I call this kind of thing out is whenever people are doing the sales pitch about how you can build anything in this kind of game, I wish that they would give the full picture just so that somebody doesn't go in and then get confused.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how this is going to work out. I know that character creation's almost 30 pages, so we're going to have a lot to chew on when we get to it.
Yeah. Oh. You know, if obviously when it comes to that sort of open point-based system, the big whipping boy for me is and always will be GURPS.
Yeah.
And as much as as much as I love Anima to death, even I still have to admit that its particular system is going to be full of a lot of traps.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said a similar thing when it comes to games like Mutants and Masterminds. Although the last edition of Mutants and Masterminds made some inroads to try and mitigate that problem, because over the years it's really doubled down on power sets. You know, point packages that you can put into, even ways to, which has always had, but with the last edition, which I believe was third, there was an attempt to be a little bit more flexible with it, and I even used that when I did my review of Mutants and Masterminds third edition. And if I had to use one other major game as a whipping boy, although it's not nearly as much of a problem now as it was years ago, I would probably say Shadowrun. Because Shadowrun would say, here's 100 karma, have at it.
Yep.
Which resulted in a lot of people using that set of pre-gens in the first chapter as their first character.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it's also not. It's a little less guidance than we would want to see.
Yeah, the reason why I said until recently is the last two editions of Shadowrun
have the grouping mechanic.
Yeah, the grade system, as they call it.
Yeah.
New Edo has a similar thing, and I know some people go, "What? Well, why aren't you throwing that same problem at Cyberpunk?" Because Cyberpunk has had a role system from the word go.
Yeah, all the way back in Cyberpunk 2013, Pondsmith had roles in the game.
And yeah, in some cases, the role just determines certain favored skills and one unique skill. But that is a direction that can be built around. If I'm not gonna be expecting a silver tongue if somebody's playing a solo.
Unless they really wanted to design a solo that talks his way through everything, like Han Solo.
Ha. Or I'm not going to be expecting a Netrunner to carry all the weapons.
Yeah, that one's not one you can really, unless you want your Netrunner to actually be bad at netrunning. In which case, why are you playing a Netrunner?
Yeah. If you want to do all the combat with all the weapons, a good GM is going to say you're playing a solo. You are not playing a Netrunner.
You know what? Pork chop? No. Stop.
Yeah. And
we're not talking about Johnny and Morgan.
Mm-hmm. I've always favored archetype systems, which I see that when I say archetype systems, I do want to clarify. I'm referring to cases where there's a umbrella, but it's not outright set what you're getting with each advancement. Savage Worlds is a major example of this kind of thing. Even though it has plenty of traps, yes, I was going to say Anima is an example because of how the class system actually works. Sword World is definitely that case because of the fact that while multi-classing isn't required, it is heavily encouraged.
Yep, and each class is basically a new skills package of some sort.
And whether you're watching, regardless of how you're looking at it, it outright says, if you want to put all of your XP into one class, you can do that, but you are putting a ball and chain around your neck.
Yeah, you're limiting yourself in actuality. I could definitely see you doing specialized, I'm just going to specialize in Sorcerer, but everything else that you're going to do is going to suffer terribly. Your initiative is going to suck. Any combat roll that isn't magic is gonna suck. No.
You're gonna be at the mercy of that 2d6.
Yeah, you're going to be mercy of a straight 2d6. No benefits, no bonuses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But the archetype systems, I think it's good for me to put my perspective on what an archetype system is as well. People design, and they don't design in a vacuum, whether they're designing a character, a story, a game, whatever it might be. There's always going to be this idea of something, a generic shape even, of what you want to build upon. That's what I think of as an archetype. You have this generic basic shape that you can then hammer into something unique for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And the basic shape does help form the direction you're going to mold everything into, but it doesn't limit you. Not really.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a combination of the very strict, very, very strict class systems guidance, because strict class systems have a, yes, pork chop, the silhouette of a character concept. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
The class systems have their place, and they can be done very well. We've seen it in a lot of games that have a very strict class system. They are the ones with some of the more stringent, I guess is the best way, guidance to say it. They give a lot of very good guidance, but it's guidance that's very, very linear because, well, that class does that thing and that thing alone. And it's also, archetypes are like the best of both worlds when done correctly. You have the guidance of a class-based affair with the freedom of an open build affair.
Which I'm pretty sure somebody will look at that and then look at what I said about Fabula Ultima is like, well, why didn't you like the archetype system in Fabula Ultima? Because it was too restrictive, and in some cases you had outright taxes.
Yeah, character taxes aren't good unless they're interesting and there's a benefit to being taxed.
Yeah.
For example, one of my favorite games to fuck with people's minds, Tenra Bansho. There's the karma tax. You have to keep your karma below 108 or you lose your character. But karma is also accrued as part of how you level up, and resolving karma is interesting because it's how you resolve narrative story beats. Tenra Bansho ties narrative and marries it with mechanics very well in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
It puts a little bit of a harder onus on the GM to make sure that those resolutions can occur, but it's so good when it does. So with Fabula Ultima, if it's too restrictive, it's not really a good archetype system. You have to have a certain amount of play.
I guess the better way for me to put it is that it's trying to do a kind of skill tree like affair, like the spheres system, which we'll be talking about on some level on Sunday.
Yeah.
But the problem was it fell into the same trap as like the feat tax issue in D&D 3.5, and Pathfinder has that issue as well.
Yeah, and so what we're going to be looking at when it comes to character creation with the Robotic Age is to see whether it falls into those traps or manages to skirt around them and create a satisfying character creation experience.
And I will note one other trap that I've seen. And that is in regard to skill systems. And this is one of the other reasons why Shadowrun was my whipping boy for so many years. Fifth and sixth edition aren't as much of my whipping boy, although especially sixth. Fifth still had issues, and it's more throughout the 90s and a little bit of the late 80s. A lot of game devs had this massive boner for putting in as many different individual skills as possible in the name of realism, I guess. I never got a straight answer as to why.
You
And
probably never will either.
no. And some of you may be thinking, oh, you're slagging the skill list from third edition again. That's actually one of the better one of the saner, better examples back then. But I'm not letting that off the hook either. I mean, why does use rope need to be its own damn skill? Uh or
Yeah, I
what
never understood that one.
why does run, climb, swim, and jump all have to be separate skills?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have gotten on that, but as long as people keep wanting to push this realism thing, I'm going to keep slagging it. And Shadowrun has a lot of skills in that regard, and then has skill specializations. And keep in mind, all of this is still on that starting budget of karma points.
Yep.
And a big reason why. Now, I've seen some people go, well, what's the right number of skills? And I'm like, it's not a matter of the right number. It's a matter of having it so that each skill is still somewhat viable, and none of them are traps.
Yeah.
Like language use, or if actually, I'd say one of the most common traps when it comes to skill systems is knowledge skills. Which is why I'm glad that we didn't go that route. We just went with the knowledge check, which I shamelessly stole from Fantasy Craft.
Yep.
Having different subjects as individual skills in knowledge or crafting. Every time you add another subtype of that, you're adding another sync for points. And you're only going to have so many. This results in certain characters having to have this ridiculous amount of knowledge skills to cover their more seasoned kind of character. Like if you were just making you're making a character who's a sailor, then think of all the different knowledge skills that they'd need to have. You know, needing to know about flag code, needing to know about being on a ship, needing to know repair, needing to know the types of materials, all of that kind of stuff. Some will try and streamline that as say a background skill, but that just is revisiting the same problem in a different coat of paint.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for that reason that I'm always like, you're gonna have it would be better to have a multi-purpose set of skills rather than focus on individual things, because when it comes to the skill set and the talent set of actual people, it's gonna be in groups. Even if somebody might be a better runner than they are a swimmer. It's not like somebody who's already reasonably athletic is going to be as bad as swimming as somebody who's a complete scrub.
Mm.
I mean, we've seen this in real life with how like Eddie Hall can somewhat hold his own in other sports when he's tried them. In some cases, he clearly can't, and he knows it, and makes fun of himself about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like sumo, he's able to handle that. That's not too far removed from what he was doing as a powerlifter. But say the lumberjack games, he was absolutely awful at that. You know, just something as simple as the overhead chop game. No, you're supposed to do overhead. You've seen it. You're supposed to do overhead chops on a log you're standing on until you get halfway, then do it on the other end. The UK team could do that in about a minute. It took them half a damn day to do it. So these are the kind of things that we're going to be looking at. Because as tempting as it is to say, oh, you can make your character into whatever you want. In reality, you need to have some sort of guidance, the thing that we constantly harp about, Otherwise, you are doing what you're doing, the age-old throwing someone to the middle of the deep end of the pool and saying, "Swim, damn it."
Yeah.
And part of the reason that we're so harsh on games when they do that is that sort of swim damn it thinking is not as effective of a teaching tool as people think it is. That in any game with a proper tutorial or a proper guidance isn't going to do that. I know some people think Souls-likes throw you into the middle of things, but in reality they don't. You get a little bit of time to learn the basics, and then you get your ass kicked.
Yeah, and they tend to introduce elements time, except for things like, you know, the big bad boss that's supposed to scare you at the beginning to let you know eventually you're going to be able to beat it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Taurus demon, etc., etc. Or for those playing Elden Ring, the first tree guardian you see.
Mm-hmm. You know,
and
no, even with
it teaches you.
Yeah, even with, say, fighting games these days, most of them are going to have a pretty in-depth tutorial, and everybody knows that labbing is a thing.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm not going to give a TTRPG a pass if it doesn't have proper guidance. But this is going to be the metric that we end up delving into when we tackle the character creation, which is most definitely going to be a longer stream. We padded things a little bit here, but that's just because the first episode is often always the shortest, because it's us doing the introductory stuff. And because of that, there's also the fact that the Robotic Age is not a very dense book. It's only 126 pages, and before anyone asks, yes, I checked. We do have bookmarks and we do have an index.
Yep.
We also have the index just before the character sheet in the back of the book, which is where I like it to be.
Nice place.
Mm-hmm. So on that regard, it's hitting the required highlights. But now with that said, normally I would say we're going to be to tune in tomorrow for Robotech, but since tomorrow is the last Saturday of the month, we're not doing Robotech. We are doing Hell Knight, and Gavriel has volunteered to GM for us, which will be interesting because this is the first time he's done a more virtual campaign. Like, most of the campaigns that he does are in person. This is going to be the first time him doing it in this format.
Mm-hmm.
When he's not tormenting me with whatever he's got on his barbecue. And of course, this Sunday will be the return of Geek Watch, and covering one of the rare things in the D20 bubble that I am willing to fanboy over, because although I might be a little bit biased because I've had its developers in first and third party on the channel multiple times. I know it's kind of redundant me saying I've had this person on, but
yeah, I've always said it's probably easier to say who you haven't had on.
After 5 years of it and almost 1,000 interviews, yeah. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk. Stay fucking frosty, everybody.
上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を貨物用物医用物演武包装上洛が上少年関税を忘年関税を年々上新規年々不利し関税を貨物用物